Hi, everyone. Welcome aboard, everyone, to Entrée Spotlight Event. It gives me great pleasure to welcome our panelists today, Koby Benmeleh, who's the Bureau Chief of Bloomberg LP in the Middle East, Gali Weinreb, the correspondent at Globes, and Yaneev Avital, Editor-in-Chief of Geektime. We thought we'd engage the experts in the field, an online media player, a Israeli print and media player, an online player, and a global leader in news and business news media, to try and get a different view from each of these fantastic panelists on some of the questions on how startups can best address, approach, and get great results from the media. I think as a beginning, Entrée Capital is proud to host this event. We host regular events, which we call spotlight events, to bring interesting topics to founders that they can benefit from. As you know, or may know, Entrée Capital is a fund which does early stage investing in Israel. We also have an early growth fund in Israel, and we have a global fund that invests all over the world. We have 90 odd companies that we've backed over the last decade with 26 exits and IPOs. And today we have in our portfolio around 12 or 13 unicorns. So we're very proud of our achievements to date. And we like to say that we back the exceptional to achieve the impossible. And hopefully today will help doing that. So without further ado, I'd like to start the discussions today and kind of do it in an open forum with the panelists. I suppose the initial question and the initial thing that comes across in a startup's mind is, how do I get people's attention? Will they love me? And yet probably ultimately the most important thing that a startup requires is, will they respect me? And so with that, I'd like to open the first question to you, Koby, and ask you, what is a good pitch? What is a good way that a startup can engage you, can approach you to get a positive outcome?
It's a good question. I think there are basically two golden rules. The first being no jargon. I know that startup entrepreneurs, they're working on this company. It's their baby. They live this, they breathe this, and sometimes they can get lost in this stuff and they start to speak in that language, whatever field that is, right? And you approach someone who has barely any exposure to this, and they're trying to convey this story to a wider audience. And if it's all of it's coming across as just jargon, your brain just turns off and says, I have no idea what this person is talking about. Now, the flip side of that is to make your story as universal as possible. So I'm a slightly different beast than, I represent a slightly different beast than Gali or Yaneev, but, we speak to a global audience. And so the questions and the challenges that we like to write about are global in nature, or at least, cross-border. So millions of people around the world are dealing with X problem, and here's this company that's doing something about it. So you immediately identify with whatever problem that is. And if it's in healthcare, or if it's in fintech or whatever, right? There's something there that, because your idea, you want to sell this product to as many people as you can, there's something there that reaches everyone, or a big chunk of the population. So seize it, find what it is that you're doing, right? That speaks to so many X millions or billions of people around the world, and hit on that. That should be your selling point.
Gali, how does someone get your attention? Is it through PR, or, what makes you pluck up interest in something?
Well, usually people can approach me either through a PR representative or directly. And because we're a financial newspaper, we are interested in the same things that are interesting to possible investors. So if you have a good investment pitch, then probably some of the things that make your investors open their eyes will work for us as well. If you have a lot of money as invested in you, or you have contact with a very important strategic partner, that will make me understand that other people have also believed in you in the past. But the other thing that we need is also to have a good story. So if you can look at it from our perspective and see like what the people around you would have wanted to read in the paper, like if you can add like a very big funding to a story that you would tell at the dinner table and catch everybody's attention, then I guess that's when you have like your winning pitch.
Yaneev, how do you see it in terms of what's interesting? You know, so many of these articles are just, you know, company A raised so many dollars, and it's kind of the Andy Warhol, you know, 15 seconds or 15 minutes of fame. How does one differentiate? How does one, you know, rise above the noise?
So first of all, I think that the entrepreneurs should ask themselves, what do you want? What do they want to get or to gain from this media exposure? Because that kind of affects everything from that moment. It could be either which media outlets should they reach out to, or how do they tell their story, or how do they tell their pitch? Because two of my colleagues here, both Gali and Koby, come from a financial perspective, and we, for example, come from the technology and the product and the startup aspect of things. So obviously the pitch should be different because, for example, we don't necessarily care about the funding that you raised. At least it won't be necessarily the main aspect of the article. So, you know, for example, if you didn't raise any fund, that's fine with us, as long as the product is interesting, as long as the technology is interesting, as long as you have a great story about your development process. So that kind of affects everything. So you need to choose what you want to gain from the media. So that affects everything from that on.
It sounds a bit like an echo chamber where you know, so many of the announcements are funding in nature. You know, I suspect from what I see in the press, so much is that. And so the question that then rises is, what do you know, a funding round is more tactical in nature in, you know, when you're communicating it. But what should the strategy be of how one engages the press? How does one do it so one raises the exposure of the company in a long-term basis and not just one release at a time? Gali, what are your thoughts on that?
I'm actually listening to you and wondering if it's possible, because the nature of news is that it's event-based. I mean, when you have a funding, it actually gives you the like the hook that you need to say something happened. So what can be something happened in a company's life? Of course, we do profile articles about companies, but that's also something that you can do like a limited number of times, because when you're introducing something new to the world, then that's an event. But you can introduce something new to the world one time. So, especially in companies that are traded on the stock market, there's a big question of how you manage the news flow. And I think that there's a lot of thought of like sometimes the company actually begins to run in a way that it will generate the news flow in the very extreme extreme companies that are traded on the stock markets and very much dependent on that. They have to actually have events that give them the possibility to say something to the world. So it would have to be event based, and then like you have to look at your company to see what kind of events are coming up in your future. And like it actually depends if it's like a technology based publication like Yaneev's, where you would have the new version, you would have a big party for the new version. That would be an event. But if it's a financial newspaper, then like a strategic agreement, a funding, like some celebrity on your board, that might be an event.
Koby, Jeff, how does an international news outlet see it? Because, you know, Israel seems to be very event driven.
I was just thinking when you were asking your question, well, so one idea is you could just be like NSO and just be in trouble all the time. Then we'll write about you as much as possible. That's one strategy. Look, it's hard. You make a good point that a lot of it now is sort of fundraising, but it's really hard to decouple what's going on right now, which is just there's so much money, and therefore these rounds are just every single week. There's 4 of them, which is insane, right? That I can't remember happening. I can't remember that happening, frankly. But you know, I think to Gali's original point, where she was saying that, you know, if you have major or significant people or groups or companies believing in you, whether that's by investment or they're buying your product, I think that in itself is also a way around changing the story of the, you know, company X raised blah 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 money or was bought by someone. It's a way of talking about again putting that company's technology in a global scale. So that's interesting, right? Use cases, you know, trend stories, things like that. So another way, again, because these people live and breathe their industry, they can see what's happening on a much broader scale. And I think that those kinds of ideas are also very rich because they're telling it's a story about the company, but it's also about a much broader trend, which are very interesting to our readers because again, it's what is happening in the world or what's happening in Israel on a much wider scale. Which again, the startup entrepreneurs, they see that, right? They interact with that kind of behavior a lot. So they're a wonderful resource to us for these kinds of stories.
But to extend on that, Yaneev, you know, there's the story that you're publishing or that you're taking to press as a startup about your funding round. But then there are a lot of other articles that Koby mentions where you're writing about an industry or about a trend or something that's happening. How does one get on your radar? How does a small startup that's trying to create some exposure, how do they get associated with that function? So as an example, if online direct-to-consumer insurance is something that a startup finds itself in, how does it get on the radar and stay and be regarded by you when you're looking to get a quote for a piece or when you're writing a trend piece or something like that?
So there are many ways, obviously, and I believe we'll get to this later, but obviously when you have a PR agency, so usually they'll offer you, you know, like put a spotlight on some kind of industry, so that could help. But usually when we get press releases, when we get the pitches from the entrepreneurs via email, for example, we don't, even if we don't write it the same day or same moment that we get it, we still have them in the back of our minds and in our inboxes. So even if we don't write or cover you at the specific moment, we'll get you sometime. If, for example, if you mentioned InsurTech, for example, if we do a piece, a comprehensive piece covering, say, Israeli InsurTech companies, then we'll get to you. We have the mails, we have the pitches. We sometimes put it in aside in our like a small sheet, you know, just to for future articles. So no worries about that. But usually when you participate or when you take part in hackathons or demo days of different accelerators, that's also helpful in making sure that you'll appear in one of the articles soon to be published.
And would you say, maybe Gali, Koby, if you can weigh in on this, would you say that having a PR agent a PR firm that helps you is a better way to know when these things are happening because they have better constant relationships? I mean, do you prefer to deal with PR companies because you can, for any reason, or you know, do they serve some sort of aggregation point or something like that, or do you prefer to have that one-on-one relationship with the founders?
Gali, which one of us says no fastest?
I like to deal with the founders directly. I'm not always sure that that's the best strategy for the founders themselves. I mean, I love to talk to people directly, and I respect the when people contact me directly, I know that they're talking about what's dear to their heart, and probably I would give them more time and more attention. But I think that the PR companies, they do sometimes know, like if I contact them about one of their clients, they might help introduce another one that's in the same area to the same article. And they're relentless. They will ask me once, twice. When you're talking about something that's dear to you, you might get insulted from getting no answer or something like that, or like from getting a few negative answers in a row. And the PR people are relentless, so they will ask again and again. So I think many times, even though we like very much the one-on-one relationship, and we want that to stay open, it's good to also for the companies to also have a PR representative.
So, you know, leads me on to the next question, which is quite a few founders in our portfolio come back to us and say to us, hey, you know, we sent a PR or we sent information, and what they published was factually incorrect, didn't have enough information in it, or kind of interpreted wrong, or was written incorrectly in some way. And they never came back to us to verify before they published. So how does the process work? That, you know, from you receiving a PR to you deciding to write about it, to you fact checking it, to making sure that it's something that's valid, that's written correctly and is published. And do founders have any sort of input once they send that PR to you?
What do you mean by PR? Like just a written statement, or
a written statement, a communication, a telephone call, or something like that?
I mean, for me, it's quite simple. If we made a mistake, I hear about it and we have to correct it. So there's no, you know, that's pretty straightforward. When it comes to fact checking before publication, I think we're pretty rigorous about that. And again, if you do spot something, you know, we own up to our mistakes and we correct it. So on our end, I don't have anything.
But there's no way of vetting something before you publish.
I mean, just personally speaking, the way I like to do it, because understanding that what I write is sensitive in the fact that this is information that's given to me, and I have to verify it. But it's about someone. So imagine me, talking about Avi in front of a crowd of 100 people with a megaphone, and I'm just saying a bunch of stuff, and some of it's wrong. I mean, that can be kind of uncomfortable and embarrassing. So I'm aware of that kind of responsibility. So I like to check with the people and say, hey, is this right? Were you founded this year, that year? I like to take that extra step before publication. If for some reason I missed one detail and I didn't follow up before that was published, again, email me, call me, and say, hey, that's wrong, and we'll fix it.
It also depends on what type of relationship is created when you initiate the piece. I mean, if you send out something that's like a medium to big story and you send it out to everybody at the same time, and they rush to cover it, and each one is trying to do it faster than the other one, then there will probably be less time to verify. But if you either give it under embargo or you choose one person, then usually we will have more time for a phone call and to talk and to make sure that everything is correct. But there will still probably not be a process where we send a piece to people, they look at it and they send it back, because it becomes not journalism. It becomes too close to advertising. So that's usually not done.
Which then come. Sorry. Yes. Sorry.
I just want to say that is something that is a no-no. I get asked this a lot in Israel. I don't know if this happens a lot in other places, but to see the article before it gets published, I get fired for that. So.
Okay. So that's the crux, that once you fire as an entrepreneur, you forget. It's out of your control.
Exactly. But just pay attention that when, unlike in the past, it's not a printed, at least for most parts, it's not a printed article, where we're talking about online publications. Then at least in my website, we correct if we have something, we don't get it right, and we correct it within seconds when we get it. So no worries about that.
Right, but it does lead on to the next question that I had, which is when I'm planning as an entrepreneur to send out my PR about some sort of event that's happened, how should I plan on sending it? Do I plan to have an exclusive with one paper, or is it an exclusive with one media outlet per country or per industry, or do I scattershot it to everyone? What should my plan be as a founder? How should I look at that?
I guess it would depend on, it's kind of a market of information. Like you can see it as kind of a bidding process. Like if you have that your information is very, very attractive to the outlets, then you might start a bidding process and see, and like contact one and say, what can you give me? Can you give me like a 3-page magazine article? Maybe you can give me a front page. And then like if they say they can't, you can try somebody else. Or maybe your strategy is to send it to everybody and make them scramble, like I said before, and like make it like the event of the day. It's kind of like you have a very sensitive strategic plan to make with probably your PR representative to see how you can like milk the most from the information that you have, depending on like how many publications is it relevant to, how attractive will it be seen, how important is it for you to get it out on the same day that it goes out, how important is it to you to actually have the dialogue with the reporter, like you said before, versus just like sending it out and seeing what people would do with it. It's like really it's like kind of when you want to go into a funding round, or even when you want to go into the stock market and you're doing your roadshow and you're seeing if you should do a book building and offer it to just a few people, or if you want to do a one-time event and give the feeling that if you're not in there, then you're missing out. That's kind of the kind of thought that you should have, that you're like selling something and you want to know how to price it and how to bid it.
So Yaneev, how do you look at it in terms of how important is the exclusive to you, or does it really matter? Is it, the fact that people have an exclusive and it lasts for 1 minute or 5 minutes before they publish everywhere else? Does it really make a difference?
I think before that we should get back to the basics, and I think that each and every entrepreneur, excuse me, should ask themselves, what do they want to gain from this media exposure, because that affects everything. And as I said before, if you want to go on a hiring spree and get as many engineers as you can, then going on Channel 2 on prime time won't help you with this. And if you want to make your mama happy and proud, then obviously if you go to say Geektime, that also won't help. So you have to decide first what you want to get from this article or piece published. And afterwards, then you can see for yourself where do you want to put your bets. Now, regarding the exclusive well, it depends. It differs, because if it's a big story, then everyone will publish it. If you're going for an IPO, or if you raise a major round, then everyone will publish it. That's for sure. If you have a less, say, sexy story, then I suggest you pitch or reach out for different journalists and try to make the best pitch according to the outlet itself. For example, if you approach, say, you try to reach out Gali, then obviously you'll highlight the financial aspects, and maybe if it has some kind of relevance to biotech or biomed, obviously you should put it in front. And if you want to reach, say, investors or foreign VCs, then obviously Koby is the right address for you. So it's very different from one to another.
If I could just add that two other things. One is that something unacknowledged here, but some people develop relationships with reporters over time, and they get to trust them, and they know how they work. So that does play into this. Meaning, so one entrepreneur does a story with someone, and they were treated fairly, and everything was open and straightforward, and so that just sort of builds upon itself. And the second thing is, keep in mind that exclusives, that kind of stuff is a market, right? And in a reporter's mind, how it's done, there are certain premiums on specific. So if one outlet gets a scoop and blows away everyone else, that's got a higher premium than saying you get to have the embargo, I don't know, let's say 15 minutes before everybody else. As you said, Avi, like, what's the difference? Everyone's going to have it in 10 minutes anyway, unless of course it's like some monster scoop, right? Like I recall the Mobileye Intel deal. I think the market broke that one like several hours before everybody else. It's like, yeah, everyone's chasing their tails and looking to their bosses like, oh God, why don't I have that one? It's a much different feeling than coming into the office and saying, I've got this story that no one else does. and everyone's scrambling around chasing their tails, and I get to do other stuff because I've owned this story. So keep that in mind, right? When you're sort of blasting away a story to everyone at the same time, it does lose its that premium feel, right? Whereas like if you're the only one, and you're going to be the only one for quite a while with this story, that's got real transactional value, let's say.
So maybe, to make it more realistic and practical for the entrepreneurs and founders out there, do you want to give maybe 2 examples of things that have PR that has gone really well and an approach from founders that went really well, and then to contrast that with 2 approaches of stories, you don't have to actually name the stories, of things that were really shocking, that were absolutely the wrong way to approach, or the wrong way, or the wrong outcome? Maybe, Yaneev, you'd like to start with that.
So first of all, I think that you need to be honest and sincere, and kind of, I think that you should, when you speak to a journalist, try to think of it as if you're speaking to a venture capitalist, or it could be either an investor or VC, because eventually they'll fact check you, and so don't try to hide, say, a competitor or your stage in the market, or how much money did you raise, because eventually they'll find out, and so it won't help you with publishing the article. And secondly, I think that you need to make the pitch relevant to the person that you are pitching to. So make sure that you highlight the aspects that are interesting for the news outlet or the newspaper, because that could help you. And also, if you do some research before that, try to Google the journalist's name. Try to see what kind of articles, how does he or she cover those kind of stories, so you know what's interesting for him. That could help as well.
Okay, Gali, 2 good stories, 2 bad stories?
Well, when I think about like stories where like the PR people made a difference, and then I would think of recommending these PR people when people ask me like what PR company to get. It's usually not about like the big exclusive where it's really like a dealer. It's more about like the insight where they can make the story bigger than it actually is. Like when they can actually suggest a trend piece to me, and it will be good enough for me to actually take it, and their clients will be in it. Then that's usually I say, oh, this PR person like really benefited their company, or something like that. The bad stories or the bad examples, I did have something like Yaneev said, where I was approached to get an exclusive from a company, and they sat with me and they didn't tell me that their inventor had been like defrauding scientific magazines, and had to retract some of his papers. And I did find it like in I think it was Chinese Google or something like that, and like we did the Google Translate and we found it out, and like that the piece was about that. And like, to give credit to the PR person, he said like, okay, you did your job. I'm not mad. Like, and another thing that I think went not so well was a company that was like maybe like building up their stories too much, and for every like, for me it's in the medical field, so for every patient they treated they took out a PR, and like in addition to it being very, very nagging to work with, it also backfired when, like, if you said that for every patient that survived, you need a PR, then like if one patient died, then that's going to be a big story also. So like it can backfire in that way when you try to over push your story. It sometimes doesn't work that well.
Koby?
Yeah, so I was just thinking about it while I was listening. I think the main theme is really is trust, which I think sort of cuts across all of our answers. But I remember when I was first starting out, a VC investor, I was meeting with him, and he told me about a publicly listed Israeli tech company that was going to be bought out by one of its shareholders. And of course, I did my checks, and it was complete garbage. You know, when you do that, you lose credibility with us really fast. So stay honest and don't try to mislead us, because we're obviously trying to check. But on the other hand, there have been entrepreneurs, I've had recent examples of this, who have just been very transparent. We ask, like, where are your holes? What are your challenges? Because you start a company, you're not going to be you're not going to be Microsoft on day one, right? You're going to have a lot of challenges, and it's very messy. And so being open with us about that is good, right? Because no company is just going to be this incredible thing, right? It's got the potential to be that, but it certainly resonates more with us when you share what are the challenges and what are your competitors doing better and stuff like that. Because that's what we also want to know, and our readers certainly want to know as well.
Okay. So one of the questions that folks have asked is how does one reach journalists? Is there a publication? Is there a website? Is there something that gives journalists emails or phone numbers or anything like that?
I think that each one of us has his own email posted in the website. I think that every article states the writer or the author, and then if you click it, you get to the reporter's email. Correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
Just for me, there's a website called the Foreign Press Association. You can find me and every other all 500 million foreign journalists in Israel as well there too.
Okay, so I think that what we'll do is we'll research that, and if there isn't an readily accessible list, then what we'll do in the next couple of weeks is we will publish a list as Entrée Capital to let certainly Israeli founders know how they can best reach the journalists. I assume that would be kind of positive for you, Koby and Gali.
I think the IFAT group has a database of all the journalists and what they do, so you can try to talk to them. But it's really, we're quite reachable. I mean, if you don't see our email, you can call the newspaper, and they usually put you in contact with us.
All right, so people still phone newspapers.
in a landline. There's actually a landline still.
Landline. What was that? Okay, no, that's great. And how do you think that one of the other questions we've had is how do you think that COVID has changed your work and has changed how you've been reached, or how the coverage of events have happened in the last year as a result of this pandemic?
Yeah, well,
it hasn't changed.
No, well, I mentioned before, right? I mean, the money is just everywhere. So it has been very deal and transaction focused this year. I think you're right, Avi, that to sense that. But not being able to meet with people is a setback for me anyway, and that's where I get my mojo, meeting people and seeing it up front and with my own eyes, because that adds. There's always some sort of magic that comes out of meeting people face to face that you just don't get over Zoom. So you get less detail. So your bits. I feel like I'm more separated from the stories than I would be normally. So you have to just sort of. I think most of the stories are very high level. So from like 3,000 feet in the air. That's just been my sense. I don't know about Gali and Yaneev.
I think that that's true, and especially in magazine pieces, you feel it when you can have like a real connection with the person. If you're writing something with more color and so on, that's harder to get. I also see a plus side of it. Well, first of all, I'm covering COVID, so I'm very, very busy, and I have a lot of international level action that I've never had covering the Israeli medical healthcare sector. But also because of the distancing, I'm doing it like on par with any of my colleagues around the world. Like I get to the events very easily. It's a very democratizer of for people who are trying to cover like international stories from Israel. And also it does change productivity. I mean, when I do want to do a story that's more information based and less connection based, like condensing it from 3 hours, 1 hour meeting, 2 hours on the road to 1 hour just lets you do so much more. And it's really like not something that I can like look at lightly. So that's how it's been for me.
Great. And so I think just bearing in mind that we almost out of time, maybe in closing, you'd like to, each one of you, if I may ask, if you can give 3 short, important points that you recommend for founders that are, for you, the most important factors. Yaneev, do you want to give it a dash?
Could you be more specific with what? With getting the story published, or how to address a journalist?
How do they get the right press to the right people and get the biggest return for their story or for their announcement?
So as I've said before, I think that you need to be very you need to know what you want to get from it, and that will lead to everything. So first of all, you need to be very focused on what are your goals and what you're trying to get, and that will lead to everything. So after you do that, that's everything else will be easier. It will be more technical, getting the journalists the names and email addresses. That's that's a piece of cake. But you need to know where to whom to address to and how to pitch him or her. That will be the hardest part. Afterwards, it's all technical.
So form follows function.
Exactly.
Gali, 2 or 3 recommendations for founders and the press. In
addition to that, which is very important, I think you should formulate your story in your head as what is the story that I'm giving the journalist? Like, don't come to them with all of what you know about the company, but think I'm selling him headline that goes like this. I'm selling a story that goes like this. Like, I'm not pitching a company, I'm pitching a story. You could benefit from trying to say what are the 3 most important sentences. Like, if I had to do like the story in 3 sentences, what would it be? I think that's a kind of exercise that's good for founders. And like you said before, like Koby and Yaneev said, keep the relationship honest and open.
And Koby?
Yeah, would say tell the truth, but if that's too hard, then just don't lie. Relationship is key. So our job is to just hunt for information, and if you provide us with a steady stream of valuable information, new information, you're always going to be on our minds, and so on some level that will pay off somehow. It's hard to tell when exactly, but that tends to be the case. Just basically what Gali and Yaneev said, that focus what it is that you want to tell us. It goes back to what I said before. Forget all the jargon and just sort of simplify the idea and say, in Gali's case, there's a drug that that might cure a certain disease, and it's a market is this big, and X many people suffer from this in certain whatever Europe or in the United States, and the leading company is this one. They have this many billions of dollars of sales, but this is the upstart that's going to revolutionize, that's whatever, right? Like those are sort of the key metrics that I think Gali would expect any kind of pitch to come with. So yeah, and then of course that applies to every space.
Great. So if I can summarize, the key things that your recommendations entail for a good story are: form follows functions, stay very focused, be able to write your story in 3 sentences. If you can, then it's topical, and if you can't, then you're probably embellishing. Stay honest, truth, don't lie, don't embellish, and build a relationship with the journalist of your choosing. Provide a steady stream of relevant information, because it pays off in the long term. And with that, Gali, Yaneev, Koby, we really want to thank you for your time, and really, really positive, good feedback already we're getting from all the people who've attended, and very important, relevant information, which hopefully we'll take away and we'll publish and make available to our founders and the ecosystem at large. So thank you very much for your time again, and we hope to follow up soon with the next event.
Thank you, Avi.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone.